In the wider galaxy, military tensions continue to build during the Separatist crisis. Some of Jango Fett's contracts lead him to directly confront Jedi opponents. One such incident sees him use Slave One to intercept Obi-Wan Kenobi, flying a prototype Jedi Starfighter, though they both escaped the encounter without learning the other's identity. Elsewhere, hostilities escalate between the corrupt Trade Federation and the resistance fighters of the Lock Revenants. During one engagement, Jango inserts himself in an intensive space battle to capture his latest bounty, Toydarian mechanic Reddy, who previously interfered in Jango's hunt for notorious smuggler Race Carton. Captain Kavik Toth of Separatist mercenary outfit Sabot Squadron informed Jango of Reddy's whereabouts to use the bounty hunter's skills to secure a victory over the stubborn Revenants. The chaos of the battle should have allowed Jango to seize Reddy while avoiding direct confrontation with Reddy's close friend, the Lock Revenant's pirate leader Nim. But Jango is too overconfident. He warns the participants in the battle not to interfere in his hunt, expecting his reputation and piloting skills to be enough to intimidate or defeat any who oppose him. Instead, Jedi Starfighter ace Adi Gallia provides enough cover for Reddy to jump into hyperspace. Jango abandons the battle to pursue Reddy. Vanna Sage, another Revenant associate and an occasional ally of Jango, will later search for Reddy, but his status remains murky in the aftermath of Captain Toth's death. Whatever fate awaits Reddy, nothing good lies in Jango's future, as the Clone Wars nears its debut, and Jango pays the price for his vendetta against the Jedi Order. Technically, the Trade Federation is already counted among the influential commerce factions aligned in the Separatist Alliance. However, Viceroy Newt Gunray stipulates the death of Senator Padme Amidala of Naboo in exchange for the Federation's full support. Count Dooku, the head of state for the Confederacy of Independent Systems, agrees to Gunray's terms and assigns Jango Fett the job. To maintain distance from a high-level target, Jango subcontracts the assassination to Zam Wessel. Amidala and her Jedi protectors prove to be too clever and diligent for the esteemed assassin to best them. Jedi Padawan Anakin Skywalker and his mentor, Obi-Wan Kenobi, apprehend Zam and interrogate her for the name of her client, before she can divulge any useful information. Jango from a distance fires a Kaminoan saber dart, injecting his former friend with poison. Although Zam curses against Jango in her dying breaths, she knows the hit is not personal. It is only business. With Zam's death, her daughter Zon disappears, and Jango escapes to return to Kamino, where he gives what comfort he can to his son Boba Fett, who receives a new lesson in learning how to mourn for one of the only friends he has ever known in his short, isolated life. Obi-Wan Kenobi tracks Zam's killer to Kamino, discovering the secret Grand Army of the Republic developed over the past 10 years. The Kaminoan clone masters explain how the clone army was originally commissioned by Jedi Master Sifo Dyas and is now ready for deployment by the Republic. Restraining his surprise at the revelation, Obi-Wan digs deeper and meets the Prime Clone template, Jango Fett. Jango explains he was hired by a Lord Tyrannus to contribute to the clone army, but keeps the truth about Dooku and the Sith completely confidential. Even so, Obi-Wan soon deduces the bounty hunter played a part in the Amidala hit and tries to arrest him for questioning. Jango and Boba outmaneuver the Jedi and flee in Slave One. For all intents and purposes, their lives on Kamino are over. The Kui Valdar and the Kaminoans have no time to process Jango's departure as Obi-Wan pursues the Fetts to the Outer Rim world of Geonosis. Now officially a wanted man by the Jedi, Jango re-establishes himself as Count Dooku's bodyguard. Following a failed rescue attempt for Obi-Wan, the Jedi Knight with his apprentice Anakin and Anakin's partner Padme are scheduled for a formal execution at the Patranaki Arena. The Fett stand with Dooku and other Separatist leaders to witness the gladiatorial ceremony. Yet as the prisoners triumph over the bloodthirsty beasts meant to destroy them, a 200-man Jedi task force reveals itself among the arena stands. Jedi Master Mace Windu holds a lightsaber to Jango Fett's throat and orders Dooku to surrender. Moments before the Separatist droid army is unleashed on the Jedi, Mace Windu is given a split-second choice: use his saber to defend himself, or kill Dooku and let himself be gunned down by Jango. Mace's mastery of the Force grants him perception over a phenomena called shatter points. Points in the galaxy, whether physical or conceptual, which careful interference can render dramatic change to the wider whole. Dooku is one such shatter point. His death at this critical moment on Geonosis, Mace believed, could have ended the coming galactic war before it truly began. However, the Force also warns Mace of Jango's deadly skill, not to be underestimated. Mace only had the opportunity to strike once at Dooku, at the cost of his own life. In his private journals reflecting on Geonosis, Mace will concede Jango Fett as the deadliest man in the galaxy, a killer who practically radiated in the Force as a so-called pulsar of death. Jango is not Force-sensitive, but he is nonetheless a living being touched by the Force, a witness to the deaths of many loved ones, and the architect of many more deaths, leaving a trail of bodies who no longer have the luxury of being touched in the physical world by the living Force. Even if Mace did not realize the extent of Jango's vengeful hatred of the Jedi Order, Mace knew the warrior had the drive and ability to kill him, should Mace's focus falter. If Mace shifted to attack Jango first, then renowned lightsaber swordsman Dooku would have the opening to eliminate the Jedi instead. Mace's instincts guide him towards self-defense, prioritizing saving the hostages and the rest of the Jedi strike force over executing Dooku, a man who was once Mace's friend. The decision, and its consequences felt throughout the war, will haunt Mace for the rest of his days. In the current moment, as fighting breaks out between Jedi, Geonosians, and battle droids, Jango's quick draw earns him the kill of a different member of the Jedi High Council, Coleman Trebor. Emboldened by a fresh victory, Jango enters the arena to directly join the battle and score more Jedi kills. Mace Windu perceives the shatter point within Jango and engages him in a duel against the killer infamous for his slaying of Jedi with his bare hands. Despite Jango's impressive feats, Mace Windu is no Komari Vosa, nor is he of the same caliber of the Jedi Knights defeated by Jango on Galadran. For all of Jango's well-earned reputation as his generation's greatest bounty hunter, Mace Windu is the Master of the Order, a title rightfully achieved from his years of service as an exemplary, veteran Jedi, with both combatants dedicated to besting their foe in the chaos of the arena. Mace proves himself the superior warrior, beheading the bounty hunter. Count Dooku holds enough personal respect for Jango Fett to feel a palpable sense of loss from his death, but no one else is affected as harshly by Jango's passing as his son, Boba. From the eyes of a 10-year-old child, the boy had to watch his indestructible father be mutilated by what he can only remember as a madman. When the battle moves away from the arena, the Jedi, aided by the arrival of Grand Army troops and Separatist leaders evacuating the planet, Boba is left alone, forgotten, with the broken corpse of his father. Jango Fett is dead, but his legacy will persist for decades to come. Boba Fett buries his father in the sands of Geonosis, the grave marked with Jango's initials. Striking out on his own, the boy takes stock of his inheritances from Jango. Slave 1, Jango's Mandalorian battle armor, removed from his body, and most importantly, a little black book embedded with holo recordings of Jango's voice and likeness. These messages impart old lessons and new ones to his son, who must find his place in a universe overwhelmed by the largest war it has seen for 1,000 years. Rivals steal from the caches of wealth accumulated during Jango's long career, and relations break down between young Boba and Count Dooku, the Sith Lord too preoccupied with matters of the war to properly invest in making Boba a reliable servant like his father. Because of these complications, Boba follows the Black Book's advice to seek a sponsor in Jabba the Hutt on Tatooine, showing respect to the crime lord and surpassing a trial by fire, wherein Boba renders a humiliating defeat for the bounty hunter Dirge, further fueling the Gendai's warriors' hatred of anything Mandalorian. Boba becomes a temporary resident of Jabba's palace. Working out of the sandball, Boba steadily improves his skills as a warrior through real experiences without a guardian angel like his father to watch his back. It is not the life Jango wanted young Boba to have, but the life Jango hoped his son would be able to survive. Boba Fett does survive, and even thrives in his own bounty hunter career. He will grow into Jango's armor, refurbished and customized to suit Boba's own needs, and develop a reputation as a renowned hunter, exceeding Jango's notoriety. But like his father, a fair share of loss and failure awaits in his future. Boba will never claim his vengeance against Mace Windu, the Jedi ultimately destroyed by the Sith without Boba's involvement. When Boba follows in his grandfather's footsteps, becoming a journeyman protector of Concord Dawn under the alias of Jaster Muriel, Boba would become a father at 16 years old, married to a Kifar bounty hunter named Sintas Vel. Although happy for a time, tragedy will tear the new family apart. Resigning himself to bounty hunting, Boba would become a willful agent of the tyrannical Galactic Empire, a paid enforcer, carrying out the will of brutal overlords like the Imperial Inquisitors and Darth Vader for monetary gain. His service will be rewarded with a torturously slow death in the confines of Tatooine's Sarlacc pit, which he barely escapes from, surviving the aftermath only thanks to the mercy of a former enemy. It is only later in life, some 20 or so years after the Battle of Yavin, when Boba becomes the leader of the Mandalorian Protectors, and when the Yuuzhan Vong invade the galaxy, will Boba commit to using his skills for a greater cause beyond his personal vendettas and self-centered beliefs. Though even as a weary old man, Boba will stubbornly never fully let go of his independence and loner nature. The Mandalorian Protectors were originally founded by another so-called son of Jango Fett, ARC Trooper Alpha 02, Spar. After his desertion from the Grand Army, Spar wanders aimlessly until he hears of Jango's death. With galactic war breaking out, Spar's inherited memories of Jango's life inspire him to go to the adopted homeworld Mandalore to rally Mandalorians in a revived warrior movement. Spar joins forces with local police constables Fen Chiza and Toby Dalla to assemble a team of some 200 Mandalorians, eventually gaining prominence as a superior militarized force over rival movements like the New Mandalorians and a resurgent Death Watch. They pledge service to the Confederacy of Independent Systems, picturing themselves as heroes fighting a corrupt republic and paving the path for economic and cultural prosperity for their downtrodden home. Spar has some sympathy for his clone brothers, indoctrinated to fight in a war they have no true personal stake in. But he does not hesitate to send his men to battle clone troopers or to take their lives himself. He develops a low opinion of his genetic father, Jango, criticizing him for selling out, giving his DNA to create a Republic army led by Jedi Knights. Memories of Galadran still burn brightly within Spar. However, there is a flaw in Spar's inherited memories. He does not recall the deal struck between Jango and Count Dooku for the clone army's ultimate purpose to destroy an exhausted Jedi Order at the war's climax. Fully knowing Jango's commitment to the Sith Grand Plan as a means to achieve his own revenge, being aware of the intricate manipulations that Sith like Dooku execute to achieve their goals, could have informed Spar how to better navigate his relationship with the CIS. Instead, once the Mandalorian Protectors outlive their usefulness, Darth Sidious tricks the warriors into an ambush, massacring the entire lot. Only 3 survived: Spar, Fen, and Toby. Disillusioned with his failed leadership and the deaths of his comrades, Spar distances himself from his title of Mandalore the Resurrector. Although the Protectors are formally removed as a threat to the Republic, Fen Chiza convinces Spar to let the constables continue advertising the clone as a Fett heir retaining his Mandalore title. Fen would rather have Jango's alleged true son, Boba, but lacking a legitimate heir, Fen decides to use Spar to put up a front of the native Mandalorians having some sense of organization, capable of defending itself, unlike failed regimes wrought by the pacifist groups or extremist criminals. Under the reign of the Galactic Empire, Fen and Toby will rally a new incarnation of the Protectors to liberate their enslaved home. During the age of the New Republic, It is Fen Shiza who will save an older Boba Fett's life and convince him to take Fen's place as Mandalore of the Protectors. As for Spar, despite his brief associations with Mandalorian clan Scarata and a rekindled friendship with fellow ARC deserter Alpha 30, Sol, Alpha 02 will eventually resort to, once again, aimless wandering. He will find an effective means to resist the accelerated aging bestowed to all clone troopers, but that will not stop his already atypical brain from suffering clone madness later in life. He will have great difficulty differentiating reality from delusion. It is in this state that Aelin Vel, Boba Fett's daughter, finds him. Consumed by her own desire for revenge, Aelin by this time will be hunting her father, whom she blames for abandoning their family and allowing her mother Sintes to die. Mistaking Spar for Boba, Aelin kills the mad clone and takes his Mandalorian armor to masquerade as Boba Fett. She followed family tradition and became a bounty hunter, and benefits from higher payments and prestige from posing as her father. Generally, clone troopers across all levels of the Grand Army have mixed opinions on Jango Fett. Some praise both his abilities and his Mandalorian roots. They proudly serve as valiant warriors trained in the ways of the warrior, second only to Jedi Knights. The fact that the Jedi killed the revered Jango makes all Jedi that much more worthy of respect. Other clones were instilled such a deep loyalty to the Republic that they decried Jango as a traitor for aiding separatist leaders like Count Dooku and Viceroy Newt Gunray shortly before his death. Mandalorian iconography and traditions being implemented in the Grand Army's training did not warrant the man or the culture deference from the clone troops, especially when hostile Mandalorians freely took up arms against them. There was no solidarity to be shared with any enemies of the Republic. A number of clones had no opinions at all. Non-objective information on a dead man did not help or hinder a trooper's responsibility to serve the Republic. This is a widespread mentality in the Grand Army, dividing everything in their lives purely into what benefits the Republic and what does not. According to the Sith Grand Plan, the Jedi Order that commands the clones, bleeding and dying with them, will suddenly become enemies of the state, often too dangerous to be left alive. So many clone troopers, especially Chancellor Palpatine's second secret clone army, grown on one of the moons of Coruscant, will believe duty triumphs any possible emotional attachments they may or may not have developed with their training sergeants, with the Republic citizens they sacrificed themselves for, or with the array of Jedi they serve under. At the end of the Clone Wars, they will follow the will of the Supreme Chancellor and willfully execute their Jedi commanders when ordered to, or die trying. The fact they will die as tools of vengeance for the Sith Order and for their deceased genetic father will be of no consequence to them if they ever care to learn the truth. However, a minority of various clones defy expectations and follow their own emotions, contrary to the strict obedience the Kaminoan clone masters promised their clients. Spar is of course one of them, but another ARC trooper, Alpha 98, Nate, is able to find love in one of Jango's old flames, the pilot Sheikah Tol. Despite the strangeness of meeting a younger version of a former partner, Sheikah becomes close with Nate, helping him rename himself Jango Tat, derived from the native language of Concord Dawn as Jango's brother. On the planet Ord Cestus, Nate sacrifices himself to prevent the needless deaths of millions of innocent civilians. Sheikah survives, pregnant with Nate's child, and vows to raise them as a true individual, as their father had become before his death. Few ARCs, such as the Honorable Alpha 77, Fordo, or the stringent Gungan fanatic Alpha 17, will experience the exhilaration of having families beyond their brothers. A handful of other known clones do, usually coinciding with their desertion from the army. Connor Freeman is the scion of a clone deserter killed by Jango, and Connor will later form an unconventional bond with Boba Fett. Soon after Geonosis, the clone deserter Cut marries a Twi'lek, Sue Lequain, and becomes the stepfather of her 2 children on a farmstead, living a life almost resembling what Jango's original family had, before the Death Watch destroyed it. CT-5539 adopted the name Hawk Malsum and becomes a loyal soldier, serving directly under Darth Vader during the reconquest of the Rim. But when Vader proves himself too cruel even for Hawk's battle-hardened standards, Hawk leaves to search for a new purpose in life. He finds it in a woman named Talia, raising their child far from the front lines of any battlefield. Several clones also develop genuine bonds of camaraderie with their Jedi commanders. Captain Rex loyally serves Jedi General Anakin Skywalker, and later follows ex-Padawan Ahsoka Tano as a fellow fugitive of the Empire, before going their separate ways. ARC Trooper Alpha 26, Maze, values his friendship with Jedi Master Arla Ginzei over executing Order 66, so the pair goes into hiding together. Jedi Padawan Barden Jusek resigns from the Jedi Order because of his close bonds with clone commandos associated with Clan Skirata. One of these commandos, RC-1136, Darmin Skirata, falls in love with another Jedi, Etain Termukan, who will give birth to her and Darmin's child, some months before Etain's own misguided death in the wake of Order 66. Clan Skirata is led by Mandalorian merc Cal Skirata, who compensates for his failures in his blood family by formally joining the post-Geonosis Grand Army. The Null Arcs and the Republic Commandos, who are personally trained by him, are essentially his adopted children. Although Jango Fett is named the criminal of the Republic, the Qui Valdar are judged as independent contractors, free to do as they please within the confines of the law. A small sect significantly ingratiated with their clone students do as Cal does and serve the Republic to stay close with their surrogate children. Obsessed in finding ways to do right by his new family, Cal builds a pseudo-retirement home hidden on Mandalore for any clone troopers who want to end their service to the Republic on their own terms. After the Clone Wars, many Mandalorian-trained commando squads, individual clone mavericks, and even fugitive Jedi are granted shelter. Clan Skirata will even shelter Arla Fett, the long-lost sister of Jango Fett, presumed killed during the Mandalorian Civil War. In reality, she was indoctrinated as an assassin for the Death Watch, before later succumbing to the trauma of her enslavement and becoming confined in a mental institution on Coruscant. Jango never learned of his last blood relative's true fate, and Boba will never develop a relationship with his estranged aunt. But Arla will find a semblance of peace with Clan Skirata. Eventually, the Hammer of the Empire will force Clan Skirata to abandon Mandalore and seek safety in even darker shadows. But in time, the clan will develop a proper cure for the clones' accelerated aging. The Null Arc Jang Skirata will be able to live a long life in good health when he later meets a 70-year-old Boba Fett. Meanwhile, the vast majority of clone troopers after the Clone Wars consistently serve as Imperial stormtroopers of the Galactic Empire. Jango's main concern was the clone armies used as Jedi executioners, but no other unit exemplifies loyalty to the Republic and its successor state, the Empire, than the 501st Legion. A privileged subunit of the Legion answered directly to Chancellor Palpatine and became aware of the inevitable turn against the Jedi. But they buried whatever lingering misgivings they had and did their duty when the time was right. When the Kaminoan clone masters raise an army of clone anti-troopers from the Fett genome to rebel against the Empire, the Legion is led by temporary task force commander Boba Fett to destroy their corrupted brothers. As the personal stormtrooper legion of Darth Vader, the 501st earns the nickname Vader's Fist, committing atrocities that overshadow any of the veterans' heroics from the Clone War. Other incarnations of the Empire acknowledge the Legion's fearsome reputation and adopt the 501st name for new military elites, though after the Kaminoan clone rebellion, the number of Fett clones in the galaxy will drastically reduce in number. Jango's old genetic samples, and even samples stolen from an older Boba Fett, are supplanted by a diverse selection of human clone templates in the years after Jango's death. New clones and regular people will fill the ranks of the Imperial military. The face of Jango Fett eventually becomes a stark minority. Some Fett clones extend their lives as cyborg dark troopers, accepting mechanical appendages to replace sworn organic components, despite their bias against droids. Though a fair amount of these prototype dark troopers were converted without their consent, and went mad from the experience. Otherwise, if they did not die in the Empire's name on the battlefront. Surviving Fett clones retire in relative peace, leaving the fighting of future wars to non-clone replacements. Standardized clone soldiers in general become a rarity after Grand Admiral Thrawn's final campaigns against the New Republic, used only in private armies, and hardly again for galaxy-wide militaries. The Mandalorian origins and Jango Fett's personal influence in the Grand Army will wane in successor armies of new galactic empires, republics, and alliances. But just as the Republic rocket troopers and the revanchist Sith troopers are remembered for their heroics and their horrors, their victories and their defeats, so too would the clone troopers be looked back on as examples of great warriors and as warnings of the cruelties blind loyalty can bring. Jango himself was often blinded by his rage, first against the Death Watch and then against the Jedi. Jango chose to battle the Jedi on Galadran, instead of allowing cooler heads to prevail. Then Jango chose to follow Darth Tyrannus, depriving himself the chance to watch Boba grow into a man. For all the honor his father Jaster tried to instill in the Mandalorian people, Jango Fett's galactic reputation was far more mixed. Mandalore the Super Commando, Slayer of Jedi, Republic sellout, Tool of the Sith, a loving father, a selfish murderer. Jedi and Sith of the Old Republic prophesied the definitive end of the Mandalorians, possibly coinciding with Jango Fett's death. However, history sees Jango's bloodied life, setting the stage for a true revival of Mandalorian culture for future generations, though not surprisingly, at the cost of even more bloodshed, as the cycle has been for millennia. Jango liked to call himself merely a simple man trying to make his way in the universe. In the end, the Mandalorian warrior was a mortal man like any other. He was felled all too easily by a superior Jedi Knight, and remembered fondly by what little family he left behind. With his granddaughter, Murta Gev, Boba Fett will recover Jango's body from Geonosis, and bury him with Boba's daughter and Myrta's mother on Mandalore, Clan Fett's adopted home, and Jango's final resting place.